you have to find inspiration from somewhere. You have to find a purpose. And it's also having the right people around you. You need people who are going to build you up and lift you up, not people that are going to knock you down. So everything has to be intentional. Life doesn't just happen by accident.
This episode is brought to you by Thorne Health Tech. Which company do you trust when it comes to your health? Thorne Health Tech provides over 190 supplements and products necessary to avoid deficiencies and optimize mental acuity, holistic health, speed, strength, and conditioning. For years, I've taken their amino complex, whey protein, and elite multi-AM and PM vitamins. I'm proud to represent Thorne. Why? Because their quality of products is the highest, as well as purity and potency of every supplement. They're backed by the Mayo Clinic. The raw materials that go into the supplements are NSF certified for sport, as well as tested and retested to meet Olympic standards. So if you're looking to optimize your performance and get to the next level, whether it's to meet your protein thresholds or just optimize holistically, trust Thorne. To get started, enter your email and enjoy 25% off at thorne.com/u/Mark Glicini. That's thorne.com/u/Mark Glicini. This episode is brought to you by Whoop. For the last several years, I have not taken this off my wrist. Okay, maybe I have, but it was just to change the colors. I truly trust Whoop. It's a wearable that lets me know about my resting heart rate variability, respiratory rate, and so much more. I wake up in either the green, yellow, or red, and I know if I should prioritize training and working out harder or I need to prioritize recovery. I was always looking for ways to optimize and take my performance and training to the next level. Whoop's helped me do that. If you're looking to get started, here's a free wristband and a free first month, and if you don't like it, you can return it at no cost. All you have to do is go to the following: join.whoop.com/MGPP. That's join.whoop.com/MGPP. Mark Glicini Peak Performance, my clients, I trust Whoop. You should too. Enjoy. Let me know how you get on. Now, back to the episode. An innovative and integrative trailblazer. Welcome back, or welcome to, for your first time, Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. This platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode 76. My guest is Dr. Al Miquel. With over 2 decades of leadership as a medical director, a chief medical officer, and an executive of clinical operations, he founded Men's Only Medical, a groundbreaking practice dedicated to providing men with personalized healthcare. In a world asking for stronger, healthier men to lead, provide, and love well, Dr. Al is a pioneer of this vanguard, aiming to raise the standard for patient and men's care. Knowing him now for the better part of a year, I admire his faith, courage, and contagious empathy. It shows up in his active listening, compassionate attention, and rare vulnerability. As a passionate and devoted husband, father, and practitioner, he's built a brand that blends traditional practices with holistic approaches. He believes and embodies the integrative approach to healthcare and well-being. Are you interested in the intersection of entrepreneurship and health? Then please stick around. So without further ado, the leader and the visionary, Dr. Al Miquel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mark. It's an honor and a pleasure, man, to be on your podcast and to be able to speak to somebody who I admire. Even though age-wise, I'm your senior, just hearing about and learning about your journey over this past year has been very inspiring to me. And I'm just very honored and privileged to be on your podcast today.
Well, I feel the same way about you. And I told you right before we got on this that I'd be diving right into the deep end. I came across research out of Johns Hopkins that states that women are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression, yet men are 3 to 4 times more likely to take their own life because of it. So first, thank you so much for carving out a space for men. And then secondarily, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it and how that bleeds into men's only medical.
Yeah, it was actually one of the, driving factors behind creating Men's Only Medical. That stat in that study that you read and just referred to is something that isn't near and dear to my heart because I have an overwhelming number of men that I know who have taken their own lives. But being in the healthcare profession, it is something that we see very common. Uh, and what's interesting about that fact in the study is when you read into it more, a lot of these men are actually professionals and successful. These aren't people that are necessarily just down and out or lost money gambling in Vegas one weekend. These are people who you wouldn't even realize or think would take that step and are at that endpoint at the end of their rope that they feel like they have no other option than to take their own life. And I really think part of it is just as men, there's a lot of pressure put on us by society, just our families. We have this kind of like unwavering desire to protect and to provide, not just, if you're a family man, if you're not a family man, we're always trying to do more for other people than we do for ourselves. And there just hasn't been a place carved out for men to go to where we feel comfortable, where we can be vulnerable, where we can speak to somebody um, who we trust, who we truly trust. It's unfortunate a lot of times men should be able to talk to the people closest to them, their family and their friends. But because of fear of judgment or embarrassment, we avoid those conversations. And I just felt like by creating Men's Only in a space like Men's Only, it gives men a platform and a place where they can address not only their healthcare needs, but their mental health needs and their wellness needs all in one.
Well, it's a wonderful answer. And you know what it really brings to mind and was on my heart going into this, doing the research on you, men's only medical. I think for those that listen to this, it's not actually just a conversation for men, right? I was listening to Dr. Gabor Mate, who wrote a book recently called The Myth of Normal. And he put out there that 80% of those who get autoimmune disease are women, and because they're taking on so much of the emotional burden of the family. And I just am caught thinking that there's an interplay, right? It's not the chicken or the egg. It's like these things feed into each other. So my focus in this conversation with you, because I know it's so much on your mind and on your spirit to really help these men. A wonderful answer that you just gave is stronger men can really lead to a vice versa, back and forth, and helping the family, and then the woman is doing well, and then she's doing well for him, and back and forth. There's a reciprocity there. Now, as I was reading, you are the son of Cuban immigrants as well as third generation physician, right? So I wanted to ask you a question to go back and just ask you how your family and your father and your background has influenced your journey.
Oh man, it's been everything. So my father's father, my grandfather on my father's side was a surgeon in Cuba. He had to leave everything behind back in the 50s. And he basically just packed his children up, put them on an airplane, and sent them to a strange country without any contacts, family, or friends here. My father, his brother, and his sister were part of what we call the Peter Pan flights, where parents would send their children from Cuba to the United States with the hope and expectation that they would then come and join them whenever they had a chance to get out of Cuba themselves. Unfortunately, for tens of thousands of kids, their parents were never able to make that journey and rejoin with them. So they were essentially orphaned in the United States. And a lot of them have gone on to live very productive and successful lives. Luckily for my parents, their parents, my grandparents, were able to come about a year later, establish themselves with a job, which they had to do before they were able to go pick up their kids. And my father and his siblings weren't even in the same camp. They were placed into these Catholic camps, basically, where they had dorm rooms, they had tutors, they had like a common mess hall or cafeteria where they all ate. It was kind of like a summer camp. Um, and just knowing how much of a struggle and how much sacrifice that my grandparents had to make and my parents had to make, coming to this country to provide a better life for their family and their future families. It is just something that's always been instilled in my heart and in my brain about not only not letting them down, but not insulting those sacrifices. You know, I just couldn't see myself skirting through life or doing uh, the least that I could, or taking a minimalistic approach and dishonor all of the efforts and all the hard work that my parents and grandparents made. You know, and then watching my father grow up and coming from Cuba, not even speaking the language. My grandfather used to be a surgeon. When he came here, he was cleaning apartment buildings just to provide for the family. My father ended up going to medical school in Spain and coming back and being a physician here in West Palm Beach. And then unfortunately passed away in 1996 at 50 years old, had a heart attack. He just died in our house. I tell the story all the time. Sometimes I make it through it, sometimes I don't. I went to go visit some friends up in Tallahassee. It was my first year out of high school, first year in college. And we were watching football, having fun, and a group of guys that came from West Palm to go visit our other friends in Tallahassee. We were supposed to head back after the early football games, and I told them, no, let's stay, keep watching football. We'll get home late. It doesn't matter. They talked me into coming back home, and at that time, so we finally made the journey from Tallahassee to West Palm Beach. I got home still at about 11 something o'clock at night. Got home, went upstairs. My dad was in the bedroom. I thought he was getting dressed into his pajamas for sleep. Later to find out he was getting dressed in his clothes to go to the hospital. He didn't say anything. I gave him a hug and I gave him a kiss and I told him I was home. My mom was in the bathroom, knocked on the door. I'm home. I went downstairs, and as soon as I got downstairs, I started unpacking my bag, and I heard a commotion upstairs. So I had to go run upstairs, open the door, and I find my mom in complete freak out mode. My dad was on the floor, already turning blue. He suffered a massive heart attack. I dropped to the floor, started performing CPR on him. I was 18 years old at the time, and no training, just from what I'd seen on TV. And unfortunately, it was just he was just gone. You know, we lost our father that day, and you know, that was really the kick in the back that I needed to push me forward, because I was kind of stuck in life at that time.
Dr. Al, one of the things I always go back to, specifically in starting my own foundation and the work that I do now, it was really on the thread of your pain becomes your purpose. Is that the case for you as well? Would you say that was the transformative period, or there was other things as well?
No, that was it. That was it. And to your point, when pain becomes your purpose, I think we may have spoke about it the first time we met. I think I may have mentioned it, that I've had this idea of writing a book, and the title of the book that I've been working on is "The Death of My Father, the Birth of My Dreams." Because when I was growing up, and I was, as long as I could remember, I always wanted to be a doctor, just like my old man. I used to go to the hospital with him when he would do his weekend rounds, and I'd stand outside of the patient rooms while he saw the patients. But then he'd come out, and I'd walk to the next room with him, you know, feeling like I was like a mini doctor. I would spend a lot of time in his office, just stuffing envelopes, wearing a white lab coat. Anytime I had to do volunteer, I did it at the hospital. My whole life, I wanted to be a doctor. Unfortunately or fortunately, when I was in high school, I got into playing football. I got into partying and drinking and enjoying life, more so than I did my studies. So I wasn't setting myself up for that next step of going to college, uh, or going to a good college or university, and then taking that transition to medical school. But the time when my father passed away, I was actually in Palm Beach Community College, now Palm Beach State College. Um, I had dropped some classes, you know, I wasn't taking it seriously still. And then my father passed away October 28th. So it was just the anniversary of his passing.
Wow.
And in January, that was in 1996, in January of 1997, I was in the Dominican Republic, where I had a cousin already studying medicine down there and starting school. So it was just 2 months after my father passed away, I went down to the Dominican Republic, because it was either that or continue at PBCC for 2 years, go to finish the other 2 years at a 4-year college, take the MCATs, go to medical school. And at that time, my mother was by herself. I have two siblings, one older brother, one younger brother, and I knew I couldn't be a burden on my mother anymore. And this was the way for me to really just jump into what I've always wanted to do.
One of the things that I wrote down that I'd never really heard before is you saying in your last answer, I don't want to insult their sacrifices. I thought that was a beautiful way of looking at, you're standing on the shoulders of giants and making others proud. You used the word burden there in this last response. I was having a text message just this morning with a man who's roughly your age as well, and he was using that kind of verbiage that he doesn't want to be a burden. He wants to provide well, and I think that's a common theme. And I was going to ask you this question later, but I guess I would just call it forth right now if you have an answer for those guys that are listening to this and they feel like not just that they're not doing well enough, but they do feel like they're a burden and they're not providing at the nth degree. What are the common themes or messages you're sharing with those men?
One of the things that I always try to refer back to is you have to find inspiration from somewhere. You have to find um, a purpose. And I think a lot of men, regardless of where they are in life, and if it's, as a profession or if it's in relationships, they find they're not able to reach into that bag of purpose and motivate themselves, and they feel like they're doing less than they really are. And what I have a lot of guys do is kind of step back. I think a lot of people suffer from this imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're never good enough, you don't do enough, and we focus on our negatives and our flaws more than we focus on our successes and our positives. And it's really just kind of like flipping a switch and starting to focus on the things that we are doing good, the things we have accomplished. It's so easy to look back on our failures. My life is full of them, you know, and I've suffered from it too, and I've had the conversation with my wife, who I think is a brilliant physician. She was trained up in Connecticut. She went to medical school in the Dominican Republic also, did a residency in Connecticut affiliated with Yale. She did her first subspecialty at Cedars-Sinai in LA, her second subspecialty at Sloan Kettering in New York. I mean, she has been at the best institutions for pathology that exist. She's a partner at a private group now. She is a top-notch pathologist. And there are many days where she just doesn't feel like she's good enough, and we have to have those conversations amongst ourselves, and that those honest conversations and build each other up, because like I said, it's just too easy to look at our failures, look at the things we didn't do, or that one case that we got wrong, and overlook the thousands that we've gotten right. So it's kind of redirecting, and it's also having the right people around you. It's not the funnest people aren't always the best people to have around you.
Mm,
You
mm.
need people who are going to build you up and lift you up, not people that are going to knock you down. And sometimes some of your best friends are just those guys that will constantly take jabs at you, not knowing the damage they're doing. And they're not doing it purposely. So everything has to be intentional. Life doesn't just happen by accident. So I just try to redirect how they think, or give them, at least the idea of redirecting, because I can't do it for them either.
Oh, now you're speaking my language for sure. I mean, every Thursday I release a blog, and my blog's called Intentionally. That's the title of it. I think and it's anything you do in this life, it should be intentional. You gave me three or four things that I just want to riff on. One would be the energy source that you use, right? Sometimes we use fear and pain, and just that negative energy, and that is, that anger can really get you to a certain place, right? But I feel like it is exhausting after a while, and there's a deeper reservoir to be found in faith and in belief and empowerment and things like this. A top UK therapist, her name is Marissa Peer. She says there's three things we don't want to be. We don't want to be insignificant. We don't want to be different, and we don't want to be enough. Right? Not feel like we're not enough. And she started something called I Am Enough movement. I thought that was a really powerful thing, and the redirection that you not all only are enough, but you're more than that, and that comes from the responsibility that you were talking about. I had a short conversation with your wife recently, and that's a woman on a mission, and I thought it was just amazing how she was talking about her profession in pathology. Is she's hunting the disease, she's hunting the cancer, and I was just like really motivated by that. And then the last thing on the friends front, I came across this idea recently, just like get who you're getting inspiration from. You want to relate to the people that are closest to your goals, not to the people that are just closest in your proximity. It's like, wow, that's a pretty really cool idea that you never really thought about. Just because people are around you doesn't mean that's who you should be comparing yourself to. And comparison is not something you can get away with, right? We are going to compare. It's just like, let's make sure that we're comparing to the right people. And Dr. Al, I want to go now to highlights and lowlights, right? Because you did talk about those failures, and I think that's where a lot of people can relate. As I was studying up on you and looking at, you're full of highlights, right? Magnum cum laude, chief resident, president of a house staff. I can go on, all admirable and achievements that separate you to the level that you're at now. But I think more people can relate to the low lights. So if you don't mind, do you pointing to one or two big adversities? I know you shared one, and now you're probably like, why you keep asking me about to share this hard stuff? But any more adversity that people probably could relate to that really made you the man you are today?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the biggest things was obviously you've already kind of briefly heard about how I wasn't uber focused in high school. There was a lot of missed opportunity there. I would even argue playing high school football, I was I was pretty decent. And my career ended up more like Al Bundy than it did a professional NFL player. But I was pretty good, and I don't like to say I live with regrets, but if I look back at my high school days, I feel like a little bit more effort in school, I could have had great grades and still had as much fun. If I really would have been dedicated and focused on football, there's a chance I could have gone on to play in college. There's no doubt in my mind, and no doubt in my coach's minds. My brother at one time told my younger brother at one time told me I was the biggest waste of talent in the
Mm,
family. And he wasn't sitting there trying to berate me. He was just trying to, in his way, build me up and saying, listen, you're full of potential. You're full of talent. You just have to tap into it. And that really resonated with me in a good way. And then moving forward, I did ultimately, after my father passed away, went to medical school. I found my lane. I was finally studying something I was really passionate about. I did graduate magna cum laude, and then I came back and I had to take the board exams. And I started taking the board exams after I graduated. The difference in the United States is you take the step one and step two while you're in medical school. Having studied in the Dominican Republic, we didn't have that guidance. So I ended up taking step one and step two after I graduated medical school. So it kind of put me behind the eight ball. And by the time I finished those tests and I applied for residencies, I was a late applicant, and my first round was not successful of attaining a residency in family medicine, which is the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a family physician. So I applied for all these residencies. I kind of just did a shotgun approach. Hey, I'm applying late. Let me just apply to a bunch of different programs. Heard back from a few of them with rejections and didn't hear back from most of them. So now they only do what we call the match once a year. So now, since I missed it that year, I had to spend a whole nother year outside of medicine waiting to apply to get into a residency. And that was another very low time for me because I felt like I had finally made it. I finally was a doctor. I did great in school. I passed my board exams. And here I am in limbo again, living at my mom's house in Miami, just an MD without a cause. It's just like, what am I going to do? I started working construction with my cousin just so again, I wouldn't be a burden to my mom. I'm I'm a doctor by title, with no income and living with their mom in Miami, and it made me feel like crap. It really did. And God bless my mom. She was always my number one supporter. She became my mother and my father after my dad passed away, sacrificed everything that she had. She passed away a few years ago from cirrhosis due to fatty liver disease. And she passed away with essentially nothing in the bank and everything, because everything she had, she gave to her kids. It was one of my greatest and proudest moments, when I finally moved back with my wife and we got married, was to be able to buy her a house here in West Palm Beach so she can come back from Miami to live close to us. And so that year was tough. And then I reapplied for residencies the next time around at the appropriate time. Had a bunch of interviews. I found Texas Tech. After I interviewed with them, they expressed a great deal of interest in me. I also applied in the local hospital here in West Palm Beach through the University of Miami at JFK Medical Center. It was going to be their first residency class, and I got very positive feedback from them, but something was pointing me towards Texas Tech. And long story short, I ended up getting actually what we call a pre-match. So I was able to go commit to them before the actual match process, and I found a home in Texas Tech. So that was one of those times where it was just, I felt like a complete failure, and then with enough time and enough kind of support, I was able to get through that year. And then good things come to those who wait, because like you said, I did go to Texas Tech. I became the chief resident, became the president of the house staff. I did great things over there. So I think the other thing I would say is, once I finally got out of residency, I moved back to West Palm, started working with my dad's old partner because he was still practicing medicine, had his own private practice. So I spoke with him, and we had this whole plan where I'd come back and work with him. He was getting close to retirement. He would retire. I'd take over his private practice, and then I would be the next Dr. Miquel in West Palm Beach, private practice, family medicine. Worked with him for a couple of years until he got bought out. He ended up having to sell the practice to private equity because it's very tough to have your own private practice these days. So then we both became employees of this facility or this larger group, and found myself in a situation that I never thought I'd find myself in, which is hating my career, hating
Mm.
going to work. I'd wake up every day and just dread walking through those doors, being pushed to see more patients, being pushed to document a certain way, to prescribe certain medications, to refer to certain specialists, not even being able to, in my opinion, use my knowledge as a physician to deliver privatized, individualized care to the patient in front of me, and just kind of running through these protocols that was supposed to be a one size fits all approach to everybody. And I equate it to growing up your whole life and having like your idol. If it's an athlete, if it was a singer, if it was a politician, if it was a writer, whatever it was, for decades, you just idolize this person from afar. And then you finally meet them and find out they're a complete jerk.
Mm.
And that's what I felt the medical profession and healthcare was for me.
Wow.
So then I had to kind of pivot. I thought I was done. I promised myself after I finished medical school, you did all the reading and all the studying that you had to. Obviously, you do continuous medical education, and you go to, courses, and you go to different conferences and stuff. But as far as like degrees and going back to school, I swore it off. I celebrated. I'm finally done. Only to find myself saying, you know what, there's got to be more to this. I don't know enough about the business of medicine. I have to figure out what I'm going to do to make my life better and not let this healthcare system consume me.
Mm.
And I ended up deciding to go and get my MBA degree at Auburn while I was working as a full-time physician, and I was married and had two kids, and spent 2 years on that journey.
I mean, Dr. Al, I mean, one of the things I say to my friends, the ones I've come across in the pro lacrosse that are like literally chomping at the bit to get that playing time or break through, and not just in pro lacrosse, but like they're seeking for it. I use this Bible verse called "What is delayed is not denied. Keep the faith. What is delayed is not denied. Keep the faith." I always kind of say that to them, and there the sports psychology comes in. There is, you're not judged by the number of times you fail. You're judged by the number of times you fail and keep on going. And then Winston Churchill said, "True success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And how do you maintain that enthusiasm, knowing that every single one of those things, you're like that much closer to actually breaking through? And I just love this from the beginning of your answer. There's this kind of like darkness in the Al Bundy high school years, all the way through, figuring it out and figuring it out and figuring it out. And now you're MD and MBA. It's like, wow, there's this, you feel like, there's this exponential success that's breaking through. And now can you take us into, the problems you were seeing with traditional healthcare and that shift from primary care doctor to this visionary leader in the men's healthcare space with men's only medical? I want maybe to frame up and share with those that are listening what you see as those problems in traditional healthcare.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that drew me to medicine again was my father and the relationship he built with his patients. He was able to become like a trusted friend to his patients. He was able to sit down and speak with them. One of the things my dad always used to do, and he taught me, was every time he met a new patient, he would ask them about their hobbies, their likes. He would learn about them, and then he would write it down in the notes. He likes the Miami Dolphins. He likes this. He likes to travel so that he could learn about his patients. And next time they came back, hey, have you done any traveling lately? Oh, the Dolphins really stunk it up this week, huh? Or whatever it is. So you can really connect with your patient. And then you also were your own small business owner as a physician, a private practice
Mm,
in more than a small business. And he was able to manage his own business and be his own boss and hire his employees and run it the way he wanted to. And not until managed care started to set in the mid and early 90s, which meant you had insurances really starting to dictate how doctors practice medicine. The reimbursements to the physicians started getting cut dramatically. It's it's one of those things that the longer you've been a doctor, the less money you've been making if you're in private practice. So now you're
wow.
forced to see more and more patients, and the more patients you see means less time with each patient. You can't get to learn about them. You can't address all their needs. You can't properly educate them or instruct them. We're kind of just delegating all that stuff to paperwork or the internet, or making them come back more frequently just to be able to address multiple needs. Because one thing you're even taught in med school these days is your patients are going to come in with a list of complaints. What you need to do is tell them, I'm going to pick one and you're going to pick one. And those are the two we're addressing today. And then we'll
Mm,
reschedule you and address the other ones. And
mm,
all that just didn't sit well with me. It's trying to streamline healthcare under the guise of decreasing overall cost. And all the while, insurances companies are making more and more every year. Big pharma's making more and more every year. But the front line, the physicians, the nurses, the front office staff are making less every year. And the patients are suffering for it too, because they don't have enough time with their physician to actually be able to discuss the concerns and goals that they have. So it became very frustrating. You write a prescription for a certain medication, it gets denied by the insurance. You think your patient needs a certain imaging study, denied by insurance. Now you got to take time out of seeing patients to do what they call a peer-to-peer call. So you can talk to a physician on the other line who is no longer practicing medicine but works for the insurance company to convince them that your patient needs the study that you ordered in the first place. And it's just all these barriers that they put in place on purpose, knowing
mm,
that X number of patients and physicians aren't going to take that next step. So now the
mm,
insurance doesn't have to pay for that study up front, or
mm,
they don't have to uh, pay for the more expensive medication. Let's try this cheaper generic alternative, which is fine for a lot of people, but for a lot of people it's not, and it doesn't work for them, or it causes a specific side effect, and they're just causing too many hoops to be jumped through to jump through in order to get to the end result. And it becomes very frustrating. Nobody's happy. The patients aren't happy. They're waiting a long time because you don't have a whole lot of time with them. So the appointments roll into each other. Somebody walks in, some patients no show. You're trying to see 30 patients in a day. It just became too convoluted. They dehumanized it and depersonalized it, in my opinion. And it became very frustrated. I haven't met one physician to this day who's happy with the healthcare system. I have met
mm,
a few of them that have been able to manage it but they're not happy with it. Um, and patience on the same side. Not too many people are happy unless you're kind of in a concierge model.
So wonderful. And we're going to get to the concierge model. Well, the idea that came to my mind, there was this beautiful TED talk that I share a lot. Is the guy who did it was named Bob Davids, who was an executive at Avis Rent-A-Car underneath Bob Townsend, who wrote a book called Up the Organization, which is the #1 book at UPenn Business School. And what he was talking about is the difference between management and leadership. And management are things you can't do with people. You can manage money, cost, you can manage quality, and you can manage time. And if you really prioritize one of those other things, then you lose out on the other two. And what you were just talking about there, I was thinking about the rushing nature of you meeting with a patient. You're just rushing and rushing, and that's the opposite of confidence. If I go and do a speech, as a coach, right, and I start rushing, I say, "Hey, I'm going to talk to you about this," like no one feels settled, like no one does, right? But if you're really slow and poignant and powerful, there's a lot more confidence in that. One more note on that, and then I'm going to give you the microphone on a question I want to ask you that's more fun and lighthearted. Is I was just reading this book called Super Communicators, and my biggest takeaway from the book was that people just want to be heard, helped, or hugged, which I interpreted as they just want to be listened to, led, or loved, and I really think that is at the essence of it, right? They're going to have their list of problems, but really, probably deep down, it comes down to them just wanting to be either heard, helped, or hugged in some manner. And the connection that you had me laughing with your dad asking about, the Miami Dolphins and etc. I was reading up that you're a sportsman, a hunter, a fisherman, and really into the culinary aspect of things. I wanted to ask you, are those personal passions of yours, do they feed into your professional identity and mindset, or do you see them as separate and a way to decompress?
I see them more as something separate and a way to decompress, to be honest. I think my love of the outdoors actually allows me to get away from all of the things that kind of occupy my mind on a day-to-day basis. And you may not hear this from a lot of sportsmen, but for me, it's a time that I get a chance also to connect spiritually, to reconnect with God in a way that I can't do when I'm
Hmm.
just in my normal routine of, going to work, coming home to the kids, helping them with their homework, and finding time to pray if it's in the morning, in the afternoon, on my way home from work in the car. But it just seems like there's always a distraction. And anytime I get to sit out in the woods, and for me, hunting isn't harvesting an animal. Hunting is being out in nature. If you have the privilege and the blessing to be able to harvest an animal, that's fantastic. But most of my hunts have come and gone with no quote unquote success. But for me, every single hunt is amazing. Just watching the sun come up, watching the woods come alive, watching nature just interact with each other.
Wait, Dr. Al, take the listeners inside what you shared with me, right? When you go out there like really early in the morning. Can you talk about that again? I
Oh
just
man, it's
love
so
that.
great. It's you go out in the pitch black at night. It's just, and most of the time here in Florida, it's going to be hot and muggy. And you go out and you're trying to find your way to the stand and you're tripping over yourself. You don't know what's out there. It's completely pitch black. You finally find your stand, you climb into it, you're surrounded by bugs. Sometimes you're questioning yourself, what am I doing out here? I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I'm covered in bugs, and you're sitting there just waiting for that sun to come up, for the bugs to go away, and you're just relaxing and trying to prepare yourself. And all of a sudden, just slight hint of light starts to creep up over the horizon, and you start to see like the silhouette of the trees, and you see the haze and the mist in the field, and you're starting to see and hear some of the birds start to chirp, and you're starting to hear the ruffling of feathers, I mean of leaves, and then the sun comes up a little bit more, and you start to see nature wake up, and you see the birds flying and out of the trees, the turkeys are coming out of their roost, you're seeing the squirrels running on the branches, you're seeing lizards, you may see a spider, all these things that are supposed to be scary, but It just seems so beautiful because you're not supposed to be there. And now you have this front row seat to what nobody ever gets to experience. And it's such a calming, amazing feeling to watch nature wake up, and you'll see a deer just come up and start grazing in the grass, and some wild hogs just burrowing their way through the palmettos and making all this noise and grunts. And you're just a spectator um, to life, to the simplicity of nature. It's just the most beautiful feeling, and being out there by yourself, because most of the time I go hunting, I'm by myself. And then I get that time to reflect on things and just to think about life in a different way, and to connect with God and talk to God and pray with him in a different way without those distractions and the beauty that he's created. It's just it's the most amazing experience, man. And for people who kind of poo-poo hunting as just people going out there and killing animals, I definitely encourage people to go out there. You don't have to go out with a gun. Just go out there for the experience. It is the most amazing thing to do, is just sit out in nature, um, and take it all in.
What is beautiful, what is good, and what is true. One of the things that I took away from you taking us through that story, which was beautiful, by the way, is you said this line, you're not supposed to be there. And that really gripped me when you said that, because I think it is tied to the early part of our conversation where a lot of people feel they need to be somewhere else. They need to be doing something else. They feel called, but they're not listening to that the internal signal, and there's all this outside noise. And I just love the beautiful quietness of being in that nature and being able to listen to your internal signal and be there. And what was really beautiful. And I mean, you set the stage in your last two responses on the faith side. It's where you and I relate really deeply. I just want to ask you, how does faith play a role in your life and in your work?
For me, it's at the very top. I don't have my relationship, I don't have my profession, I don't have my successes. I haven't been able to get over my failures without my faith. It's just one of those things. I was blessed to be brought up by Cuban parents who happened to be Catholic. So I grew up in a Catholic family. We weren't, my parents weren't very active. They didn't take us to church every Sunday. They didn't make us say grace every night before dinner, but they did instill with us, they instilled in us a lot of the morals that are related with being a Christian and being Catholic. We may not have prayed before every meal, but we were sitting down and eating as a family for every meal. They sent us to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school from first grade through 12th grade. Um, I went to St. Juliana's Catholic school here in West Palm Beach, and I went to Cardinal Newman High School here in West Palm Beach. For me, the most important thing about my faith is that when you feel like you have nobody to turn to, you always have God to turn to. You don't have to make a phone call. You don't have to worry about if you're going to get judged. You don't have to worry about, being embarrassed, and talking to somebody and being vulnerable with that person. You always have God, and sometimes all you need to do is let things out. People think praying is getting on your knees in a church, and saying like a structured prayer, when to me prayer is nothing more than a conversation. It doesn't have to be structured. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It can be vulnerable. It can be ugly. Um, and that's just for me a way that I can just unleash some of my stresses, and just get them off my shoulders, is just to be able to pray and talk to God.
I remember coming across this story, and I have to paraphrase it because I don't remember it specifically, but there was this nasty tsunami in maybe Indonesia. And what was left standing after many lives were lost was this phone booth, and people were going up to it and making a phone call, like, and and reaching out to their people that they had lost. And it's a very, whoa, it's an interesting thing to do. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because when you said you don't need to make a phone call, oftentimes when I bring up faith is I call it making a phone call to God or making a phone call to the world. And the people who really lack that sort of connection deep within on the faith perspective is they really don't believe anybody's on the other line. And that really comes back to what I was talking to you about, where what is delayed is not denied. And I think the word patience, it means to suffer or to endure. And if you can be patient for longer, I really do believe that it will be responded to, maybe not on your time, but it will be responded to. So I just wanted to share that because I find that fascinating. And we're birds of a feather on that regard. What came to my mind as you were answering um, that question I just asked you was how setting influences mindset and an environment dictates performance. You talked about your upbringing in the schools that you went to. You're talking to me inside of a beautiful room at your office, which is, there's couches there, there's refreshments there, there's a TV there. It's very unique to have in a doctor's office, right? And what I was reading up on is you had something on your website that said you want it to be judgment-free healthcare. And we really talked about that at the top, right? Where a lot of men feel judged and rejected and that they're not enough and things like that. I wanted to ask you more of a question on how you're doing your best to provide a space, a setting, an environment that invites and enrolls and makes men feel welcome to get through and talk about those struggles and vices. Is that one of your aims?
Absolutely. One of the things that was very important for me was to not kind of follow this template of doctor's offices. If you really think about it, everybody's experience at going to the doctor is you walk in to a waiting room, and there's just a bunch of seats in the waiting room, a window that may have a sliding door or maybe open. You have to check in with somebody at the front. They usually close the window or door back on you after you finish checking in. You're left to sit in this waiting room with some magazines or some obscure thing playing on the television. And then you're sitting there for a half hour, 45 minutes until you get called back. They call you back, and the walls are all white. Everything looks very sterile, as it should be in a doctor's office, and clean. You go into an exam room, which is just full of posters of body parts and remember to get your flu shot and, some type of diagram or something sitting somewhere or a model sitting on the countertop. And you're sitting in this waiting room after the nurse or the medical assistant's taking your blood pressure, waiting for the doctor to come in, which is another 20 minutes. You've been there for about an hour. Finally, the doctor walks in, talks to you for about 10 minutes, tells you you're fat, you need to eat better, you need to exercise more, your cholesterol's high, your blood pressure's high, take this medication, we'll see you in 3 months. And you're like, what the heck just happened? I come to this place, it feels a little cold. I essentially just got shamed and I got no instruction. So we wanted to get away from that model. We wanted to create a place with warm colors on the wall, a place where, it's a men's place and not every man has the same taste. But for me, I think of men, and this is just me personally, I think leather, I think wood, I think dark tones, grays and blacks and, bronze and metallics. And so we wanted to create an environment where a guy could come in and when he walks in, he's like, man, I feel comfortable here. And then with our patients, they don't sit in a waiting room. We have a pretty nice waiting room up front, but they don't ever sit in it because they get brought back into the lounge. And in the lounge, like you said, we have leather couch, comfortable plush seating, a big TV on the wall. We have magazines. We have a desk if you want to do work. We have a refrigerator full of different types of waters, healthy snacks, something that you can just really sit down and relax and not just feel like, you know, you're just another number at the deli counter. And then we don't just schedule people for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. We schedule people on their first visit for at least an hour because I want to sit down and get a chance to talk to you. There's this old adage, and it's reminded to me by a good friend of mine who's an ophthalmologist, and he says, patients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So in order for me to be able to be a successful doctor with my patients, it doesn't matter how many diplomas I have on the wall. It doesn't matter, if I was the chief resident or if I was the president of the health staff, if I was the chief medical officer of an organization. They want to know that I care about them. I have a patient who who I knew before he became a patient, but he told me he was looking for a primary care physician, and his threshold for finding a doctor was, he told me, I just want to find somebody who cares if I live or die.
Mm.
I found that pretty interesting because I was like, in a way, I think he's kind of joking, but on the other hand, I feel like it's like the perfect metaphor, like of what healthcare is these days. When you just go in and you're just another number, and you're being run through the mill, and the doctor's not educating you and not guiding you, and it really resonated with me. And I'm like, well, that seems very simple, but it's profound, because if you're not able to talk to your patients and earn their trust, they're never going to open up to you. If you can't find out what their goals in life are and what their mission is, then you're never going to be able to help them. So we wanted to create an environment where I get to know my patients, they get to know me. We have this partnership. I'm never pushing things on them. We're making educated decisions together based on what their goals are, and that was just very important to me. The visual aspect, even the sense that we pump through here, we wanted to make it very masculine, very appealing, but more importantly, want to make it comfortable in a place where guys can just feel comfortable and open up.
So wonderful. For our graduate applied sports psychology class, we had this Iowa wrestler come in, and they just have been so great for so many years. And he was talking about his legendary coach there. And we asked him like a really elaborate question, like, okay, what was it about that coach? And he really simply said he cared. And you just left it at that, right? And then, oh, I take another example inside of the sports psychology realm. There's a phenomenal sports psychologist at the top, and I was talking about to a guy that was learning underneath her, and he said, "She saw me." That was it, right? So, what is the whole thing here? Like this whole, he cared if I lived or died. Like I really think about that as a coach, right? Your teacher will give you an assignment, and then they give you a grade, and then you're on your way. And I feel like what I attempt to do to the best of my ability as a coach is to feel into, right? To have that empathy with the result, right? Like if you're down, I'm down. I can't believe we're down. Okay, let's go. We got to get going here, right? And I really love the comfortability, the relaxed nature, the setting that you put everybody in. And then I want to give you space here to talk about the men's only medical. I want you to elaborate on like the different modalities and offerings that you guys have. Which ones do you find that men are using more of? Which ones are they avoiding? And could you go into the things that you guys have there outside of the lounge?
Sure, yeah. So we wanted to create a space that was all encompassing for men, where we address men from the inside out, from the outside in. Now we do have a concierge practice where I provide primary care services to my patients, and they pay their yearly memberships, and I manage all their acute and chronic medical issues and that kind of stuff. But outside of that, and you don't have to be a concierge member to access these other services, we do everything from male aesthetics. So we do everything from laser treatments, laser hair removal, skin resurfacing, microneedling, Botox injections. We do hair solutions. So we do PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma injections in the scalp for men who have thinning hair. We also do hair transplants, which is the FUE technique, where we're taking individual follicles out from the areas where you have a lot of hair, and we're implanting them into the area where you have no hair. We also do performance optimization. We have a VO2 max test. I think a lot of people have seen athletes and they're riding a bike or they're on a treadmill and they have a mask on and they're breathing into it. We do that test here with a stationary bike, and it tells you how you're utilizing your oxygen when you're exercising. It tells you about your metabolic rate. It tells you about your cardiovascular health, your neurologic health. We have IV fluid therapy as well. We have 6 different types of IVs that people can use. Anything from having gone out partying too hard the night before and you just need to a quick fix me up, to NAD plus IVs, IVs to boost your immune system, IVs to give you more energy. We do peptides, which has been very popular lately. Peptide therapy, hormone optimization in the form of testosterone replacement. We do weight loss. What else do we do? We do, I mean, those are the main ones. I'd say the ones that people are accessing the most are the PRP injections for hair, the peptides have become very popular more recently, and the IV fluids. But overwhelmingly, men are looking for hormone optimization.
And I love the DEXA scan that you guys have there too, just to
Yeah,
give you the inside look on all of that. this is tied to all of this, but I really love how you've really used your MBA along with your MD to have that entrepreneurship sort of style to this. I said it at the top, innovative and integrative trailblazer, because everything that I believe in on the psychology side is the integrative approach, mind, body, and spirit. You know, looking at the entire holistic athlete or executive. I was wondering, just because you've been on this journey, you know, for decades now, right? 2 decades in primary care and the traditional side, and now you're going more towards the iterative and innovative side. If there's a young physician out there or a young entrepreneur who's listening to this, what piece of advice would you give them?
So I think one of the biggest things that I would give to those individuals and even earlier on, younger people,
Hmm.
is don't get stuck in your goals. You know, it's important to set goals. But one of the things that I found that was a problem with me was that when I was young, I had three goals in life. And this is when I was very young. I mean, I was, probably 10 years older. I wanted to be 6 foot tall, which I had no control over. I wanted to have a red Mustang, and I wanted to be a doctor. Like those are my three goals. So I became 6 foot tall by the grace of God. Uh, my father bought me a Mustang, and that's another story in itself. Um, I don't want to bore you with that story, but he got me the red Mustang, and then I became a doctor. So when I became a doctor, I was like, I've reached my life goal, my lifelong goal. I finally made it. This is
Hmm.
what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I stopped setting goals for myself. So when I finally found myself stuck in this healthcare hamster wheel and disillusioned with the whole profession, I didn't have anywhere else to pivot at that time initially. I was like, what am I going to do? This is miserable. This is what I always wanted, and it's not what I always thought it was going to be. So then I started realizing setting goals doesn't end with achieving your goal. Like achieving your goal should trigger the onset of setting new goals. And it was a new concept to me. And I'm just being honest and about the whole trajectory in my life. And then I started setting more goals and more goals. And then I got my MBA, and then I got a job as an executive at a healthcare organization. And then I aspired to have my own place, just like my father did. In some regards, this is my version of a private practice, like my dad had when he was younger. And you just have to keep setting goals along the way, or else you're just going to get stuck and more than likely disillusioned with the outcome. Because if you're not constantly trying to set new goals and aspirations and things to strive for, life gets monotonous.
Regular listeners of this podcast know that this is really heavy on my heart, this topic, because the most profound uh, graduate course I ever came across where I had to interview, you know, veterans of the NFL and of different organizations was called Career Transition. And it was extremely sad, right? A lot of these, you know, top four sport athletes, on average, it takes them 8 years to transition, and most never do. And many people look at those individuals like, what's wrong with you? You make millions of dollars. And you brought that up at the top, right? Where a lot of this is not, you know, being at the bottom, but it's actually, you know, feeling lonely at the top or whatever that would might mean, right? The divorce rate over 80%, and most of them, 75% of them are bankrupt within 4 years. It's like, what? How is that possible? And there is a personal responsibility part to it, but really it is they feel like that chapter ended, and so did like their life, right? And I learned this from character coach I had, Ben Ives, Navy SEAL, who used in his Navy SEAL retirement speech. He said, I'm not retiring, I'm refiring. And it was such a really cool way of looking at it, these constant transitioning and evolving, transitioning and evolving, transitioning and evolving. And I think you already stole where I wanted to go as a next question, but it was more about like what common misconceptions are you seeing, whether it be in healthcare or otherwise. But I guess I would tailor the question slightly differently. You talked about very vulnerably, and I really appreciate some of the adversities and challenges you've been through. What are you noticing now? What are the biggest challenges you're facing as you look to scale your business? Are your values being tested at all, or what are you seeing as main obstacles in this chapter?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is patience. You always, well, I think a lot of people go into things with certain expectations. And it's always good to strive for everything and want everything and to hit certain benchmarks, but you also have to understand that things happen uh, a lot of times slowly, or they just happen at their own time. It's not easy to start a business from scratch, and in particular, in my case, it's a medical practice. Had I had my own private practice or an established practice that I was coming from, I could have pulled from those patients to help build this new practice. But I was coming from a healthcare executive role where I wasn't seeing patients personally. So this is truly from scratch. And I'm just very blessed also to have the business partner that I have, who is my best friend, a guy that I met freshman year of football at Cardinal Newman High School, who's been very successful in his life. Credit to his, testament to his hard work and dedication to building businesses and selling them and just being a complete beast when it comes to do that stuff. He's on this journey with me, and he's been able to help me out financially and also coaching me in the business aspects. Because even though I got my MBA, I'm by no means, you know, a master businessman. I think the MBA, what it is, it helped me learn the vocabulary, helped me understand a lot of things. But just like in medicine, you don't get good at anything until you do it. You can read all the books in the world, but until you apply the concepts, they're just pages on a book. And I saw it in medicine too. You learn everything in med school, but you don't learn to be a doctor until you get to residency and you're actually seeing patients and practicing. So it's the same in business. I think the biggest challenges are having that patience. Wanting. My goal is to have 300 patients in the concierge practice and wanting to get there, quickly. Um, but it's really just understanding the process and finding ways to make those little changes. How do you attract more patients? How do you make your offerings, a little more enticing? Uh, Finding the way to properly market things is an ongoing challenge. So I think it's just having the patience and the ability to move forward, because I think that's where a lot of people fail in business, is they just see the struggles up front and they give up too early. And you just kind of have to push through that. So as happy as I am to be doing what I'm doing, it doesn't come without its stress, but it's a different type of stress than it was when I was an employed
Mm.
physician. These are things that you really need a good support group too. I couldn't do this without my wife, man. My wife is my everything. I have God and I have my wife, and then everything after that. And she has been helping carrying the family and helping me emotionally, supporting these efforts, and just having those right people around you, building you up, like we talked about before. I grew up in West Palm Beach. I have a bunch of friends. I have a lot of close friends. But what I find myself doing more and more these days, and what I really enjoy doing, is meeting new people. And you're a perfect example of this. I met you about a year ago on a chance meeting. I think you actually just walked in the doors one day, and we got a chance to have breakfast, and then we just continued conversations and got a chance to see each other periodically. And just meeting and interacting with people like you is so inspiring, and seeing the journey you've been on and that you're on. And then also that leads into introductions to other people and other people, and you never know who you're going to meet and who can help you or who you can help. So it's really getting yourself out there. Don't get comfortable and complacent with the people that you have around you. Always try to just meet more people, because you never know where that's going to take you.
100%. And the more connected, the more protected we are. And, you gave me like two things that came to my mind. Aristotle once said the number one virtue somebody could have is courage. All virtues follow courage. And I see you taking that leap here and really going for something that's like really, really important to you. So I want to applaud you. Publicly here, as much as I hope that I'm doing it enough on the private side as well, offline. I came across listening to a story about Henry Ford, and he was one of the first ones to make automobiles. And where he was buried, there's a cool little line there that it said, Henry learned by doing. And it was this whole idea of, rather than, just going to a book and studying something, he was constantly iterating and iterating and iterating. And then the cool little line that comes after that is, Henry once said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And I thought that was beautiful because he went and innovated the whole game and made automobiles. And it's just, that's really what you're doing. It's like, okay, how do I take the traditional practice like one beat further and one beat further? And you're just like, no, no, I'm gonna flip this a little bit and take the traditional, of course, and innovate beyond that. Get into the final few questions here. One of the things that I want to ask you is, what are, maybe just even one step, a man that's listening to this episode, what's one step that you hope for them that they could take, leaving from this conversation, us listening to how impactful some of the men have been in your life, what you're making with Men's Only Medical? What about a piece of advice or a hope, a step that they could take after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I think the biggest my biggest hope for men listening is, I guess, to simplify, to say, just start, whatever that means to you. And the way I mean it is, start focusing on yourself, start focusing on your healthcare. Men, like, we started this whole conversation with, men commit suicide more frequently than women. We have a life expectancy that's 8 to 10 years younger than women. We suffer from cardiovascular disease at a much higher rate than women. There's a lot of things that affect us. And a huge part of that is that men, for whatever reason, because we don't want to be vulnerable, we don't feel like we have a place that we can go to that we feel safe. Uh, Maybe life just gets in the way. We're so motivated to do so much for everybody else that we're not doing enough for ourselves. And just start focusing on yourself. And if you haven't been to a doctor, go to the doctor, get your yearly checkups, because nobody has a problem until they have a problem. And the worst way to find out about it is the way my father found out about it, and that's by having a heart attack that took him out. Because before that, he didn't suffer from high blood pressure. He had been a former smoker. He was not overweight. He only drank socially. There were no other signs or symptoms, and just suddenly passed away. And those things can be prevented. And in my opinion, really, it's not the quantity of life, it's the quality of life. So life's going to beat you up. It's going to be stressful. It's going to do wear and tear, not only on your body, but on your mind, on your soul, on your spirit. You need to start earlier than later, so that you can either maintain or improve, as opposed to just be reactive. You want to be proactive instead of reactive. And again, I'm talking about healthcare, but with everything, just start. I think me getting into business happened a lot later in my career than it probably should have, but all that in, retrospect, my whole life got me to where I am now. So things happen when they're supposed to happen. But you have to be willing to take that first step. And in business, is very tough because there's a million reasons not to start a business. There's really the fear of it, the where do I get the finances, how do I do it, and if you never start, it's just never going to happen. So start focusing on yourself, start focusing on your relationship, start having conversations, start that business you've been wanting to start. Whatever it is, just start.
And action cures that fear that you're talking here. I mean, one of the things that I do with individuals and teams to the best of my ability, right? Because I'm going off the thread you just gave us on the just start, is, the things that motivate human behavior are pain and pleasure. And pain is the ultimate leverage. And sometimes we just need to close our eyes, look 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, even longer than that, and play out. If you kept up with your habits, what's the worst that could happen? And then you can see kind of a living hell in your mind many years from now. And you also could do that on the positive side. If I was the healthiest version of myself playing with my grandchildren, what would that look like? Right. And it's like, wow. And when you have that, you find the gusto. And the reason why is because you now have that hell that hasn't happened yet and what heaven could possibly look like. And then now you're moving. So that's my piece of advice in terms of a strategy on how to get started. Now, I love asking the questions here, Dr. Al. I think every question that I ask brings us on a quest of some sort. But I just wanted to ask you, are there any questions you wish I asked you, but I didn't?
That's a great question. Um, I went into this with no expectations of what questions were going to be like. I think, I told you I wanted this to be more organic and just kind of conversational. I think, we covered a lot of great topics, and I got to tell a lot of my story. Um, you know, I got to talk about men's only medical. I don't know that there's a whole lot that I wish you would have asked me, or that I'm sitting here thinking, man, I wish we would have touched on this. I wanted to leave it open and make it organic and not forced, and I think that's kind of where we've been, and I've enjoyed it.
Wonderful. So then taking us home, where can people go to learn more about Men's Only Medical and more about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to www.mensonlymedical.com. That's our website. We're also on all the social media pages, mostly on Facebook and Instagram at Men's Only Medical. Or you can come down personally and come check the place out. You won't be disappointed. There's no commitment. Be more than happy to show you around, sit down, have a conversation with you. We're at 116 North Dixie Highway in West Palm Beach, Florida, downtown West Palm, right between Banyan and Clematis on Dixie. Or you can call the office 561-725-0206.
Wonderful, Dr. Al. And I'll just share the quick story that yeah, I did walk in there. I was very curious when I saw Men's Only Medical, and I'm always looking and curious about the new innovative and integrative stuff. And then I sat down with you for 5 minutes, and just like Malcolm Gladwell's book called Blink, where you can get a snapshot on person within 5 minutes in the same way you can in 5 years, and those things are pretty accurate. That's the jump I got on you. I saw the faith, I saw the courage, the vulnerability out of you, and I just wanted to bring that to this group and this community that listens in on Grateful and Full of Greatness. I know there's a ton of men that do reach out to me regularly that will really enjoy this one, but I don't think just men. I think there'll be people that'll be passing it on to their friends and men that are in their life. And thank you for being that beacon of light, not just for men, and for taking the time to vulnerably share your story and talk about Men's Only Medical. I look forward to our next conversation. Thanks for being here.
Likewise, man. I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me.